I know I have to do the same thing. Find myself. And we're live on Trauma Thursday. This is Dr. Alauna. We are here together. I'm here with one of my favorite people, Dr. Dawn, and we welcome you to this episode of Trauma Thursdays, the trauma of racism, part D. We needed a part two. Yes. Why do we need a part two, sis? Why do we need a part two?
Girl, because there's so much to unpackage. And we really want to address the questions that were in the comment section, because that's important. And that's a reason why we have our own platform, so we can talk to the people.
Absolutely. Talk to the people. So people, wherever you are right now, like, share, follow, what else? Subscribe. Don't make me have to go through every single one of them. You know what I'm talking. Start a watch party. This is a conversation that we all need to have about racism and race-based stuff and why we do it and what's wrong with us. And who better to talk to about this than some psychiatrists, because racism is a mental illness.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Don't let anyone tell you all differently.
Don't let anyone tell you that it doesn't exist. We're going to talk about the language that we can use to have effective conversation about a really, really, really sticky topic. Dr. Dawn, why is this topic so hard to talk about effectively?
Well, because it brings up emotions, right? It brings up emotions. So things that come out of our mouth, we hear, and those thoughts are associated with emotions. And so those emotions tend to resurface and we feel them, especially trauma. Trauma doesn't feel so good. Trauma doesn't feel so good. And so we feel it, then it goes back to a thought or a memory. Then we feel that, then it goes back to a thought or memory. So it's like a vicious cycle. And then at some point out of that cycle, a behavior happens. So sometimes it can be substance use or inappropriate behaviors. Sometimes it can be internalized, and that creates, some inappropriate things or thoughts and more emotions. It could result in a lot of unhealthy ways to manage. And sometimes it's hard to admit trauma. Sometimes it's hard to admit because we've been through something that's so traumatic, or not using the word, but scary, fearful,
painful,
danger. Yeah, painful. That it's hard to, to kind of talk about it. And then our brain is very complex, Dr. Ayana. I know you know that. So our brain likes to suppress trauma. So sometimes we don't remember traumatic situations because our brain tries to protect us from remembering because it doesn't feel so good.
So what you're saying is that our brain puts up a protective shield, if you will, over ourselves so that we don't have to dig as hard, or partition, if you will, to block out that particular thought and that thought process. So that leads me to ask you, are our memories and our thought processes clear when it comes to our traumatic experiences? Do we remember them fully, accurately?
No, we don't.
No. Okay.
No.
Not at all. So, yes. And the reason that I'm asking you about that, and by the way, let me just stop and also remind anybody who's on this thread, please drop your comments. We got lots of comments last time. Tell us where you are. Why are you joining us? Obviously, this is a conversation that needs to be had. And so you are part of that conversation. So please feel free to comment, and we will try to get to your comments as we proceed through our conversation. So thank you for joining us. Tamika, I see you. Rashida. Hi, Miss Seeley. I see you guys. So thank you so much for being here. We have an audience that we got questions from all over. We got international questions, actually. So I want to read through a few of the questions that we got, and we can go from there. So how can we talk to our kids about racism and the recent events? Give us some advice on how to talk to our kids about this stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because my social media manager, Rashida's on. And, you know, this was something that I wrote about in 2014 when the Ferguson incident happened with Mike Brown. Rest in heaven, Mike Brown. You know, and you being from
St. Louis, from Ferguson. What's up? Show me, baby.
You know, that was an area that was like home to me. I spent 9 years there. So that incident hit home. It was very personable. And so when we, you know, I did my adult residency there. When we want to approach kids, I'll just give like a simple, because I'm actually going to talk more about this as the days go on. But you want to, first of all, you know, begin with open-ended questions. First of all, you want to explore how you feel. Let's start there.
Yeah.
It's important that you explore your biases, how you're feeling. You don't want to talk to your kids feeling upset. You want to make sure you're in a peaceful state as much as possible, a relaxed state, because kids often, they know emotions. They feel your energy.
Yeah.
And if you're afraid or scared, they're scared. If you're angry, they're scared because they want to know what's wrong. Yeah. So you want to make sure you're at a calm level. And when you talk to your kids,
one thing to that?
Yes.
I don't want to forget about it. Kids actually read your emotions better than they understand your words.
That's right.
So most adults talk and they think that because they're talking that their kids are actually understanding everything that they're saying as they understand what they are trying to say. That is not the way your child is experiencing your words.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not. They read your emotions. You're exactly right. And think about that, because their brain development is not as matured as yours. So
go ahead, Dr. Dawn. Finish what you were saying. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So you want to meet them where they are. This step is actually very important, even though it may not appear to be. So you want to make sure that you're leveled with your child, that you're not standing over them, because you're, again, talking about something that's complicated, that may actually involve some degree of emotion. So you want to make sure that you're both sitting on the couch or, in a comfortable spot. And you want to make sure they're in their comfort level. So
because if you're standing over them, they perceive you like you're talking down to them. So then there's just to add to that, so that think about how they're experiencing you, and you're their parent. So you're larger to them than how you think of yourself. Go ahead.
Yes. And let's talk about George. Where was he positioned? Right? Where are the officers positioned? I mean, that is position of power. You don't want to reflect what they're seeing. That can be traumatic. You want to make sure that if you're talking about something traumatic, that you're in a different positioning where it's an even plane. And the environment matters. So if their most comfortable space is their room, talk to them in their room. Wherever that is, you want to make sure that you have, start the conversation there. Okay. When starting the conversation, basically start with open-ended questions. How are you feeling? And you want to start with what they know. What do you know about what's going on? So at least you have a starting place and not making assumptions. And you also can work from where they are, because you want to make sure you address what they're concerned about, what they're worried about, what they're afraid about. So they're going to give you information in order for you to have a starting point in, that conversation. Okay. So open-ended questions. Okay. So open-ended question means no yes or no answer. Open-ended questions are like at the question mark at the end. How are you feeling? What
so you mean whatever they tell you that they feel, that's okay. There doesn't have, right? Like, we're going to just say, okay, you're scared, or you're angry, or you're sad.
That's called, everyone, that's validation. You're validating how they feel, even if you feel different about it. Right?
Okay.
Because a lot of parents are like, how do I talk to my child? Well, this is how you talk to your child. You have to validate how they're feeling. And therefore they will continue to talk to you.
Right.
Right.
So you have to make it an emotionally safe space.
Exactly.
Because
it has to be.
Yeah. So what happens if they start crying and you're like, ugh, stop? Like, you know, when our kids cry, I feel like as parents, our knee-jerk reaction is often to get them to stop crying. So what do we do if they cry?
You acknowledge their tears. Acknowledge them. And the majority of kids cry because they're afraid, they're sad. And so you get an idea of what that emotion is connected with their tears. And you say, I understand why. I understand why you may be sad about this. I understand why you may be afraid about this. I'm afraid too. How about that?
Dare we admit that we are sad and afraid and angry as well. And that our normal human, our amygdalas are ringing.
You know, it allows our kids to say, I'm not the only one that feels this way. Mom feels this way too. And see, the misperception is I have to be strong for my child. And that's the wrong perception to have.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you're actually not showing any emotion during something that it would make sense for emotions to be shown during, then you're actually showing maybe weakness in that you're not tough enough to get into having a good cry.
That, and you're also teaching your kids not to show emotions or to admit an emotion that's attached to an image, to a memory, to a moment, to an action.
Wait a minute. So you mean we teach our kids to lie to themselves about, I have to stop with that one because that's
why I like redefining what strength is and what being strong is, because it's a part of this whole stigma that we have. It really is a part of mental health as well as being Black in the African American community.
Okay.
We gotta let that go.
Absolutely. Let it go. It is false. It was a lie. False. We have found it to be false. And done with that trauma thinking. We're going to be more descriptive, objective, non-judgmental, and effective in our thinking so that we can peel ourselves out of that stinking trauma thinking that judges us so harshly for normal stuff. Okay. So now in talking to kids about racism, and I see a comment where someone's asking, what do you think is a good age to talk about racism and everything that's going on? And my answer to that would be now, whatever age they are. Because this is going on right now, and if we start having the conversations now, we can normalize the conversations, and then we can actually get past the conversations that we haven't actually had yet.
And let me briefly go through some of the steps, because I think it's important so the first one is open-ended question. The second is providing brief answers. So I do agree to some degree that any age, but I would definitely encourage you that it's a must when they start asking questions.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You never want to avoid this conversation.
Right.
Because they're actually coming to you wanting answers.
What happens if you avoid it? Like, what is
it could become something different. You never want to leave a conversation with a child without understanding what they understand. So so that's kind of a part of this process, right? So, brief answers and use words that they understand. You don't want to confuse your child with complexity, like with racism. Like you can't define racism with racism. You have to really break it down to where they understand, and immediately say, do you understand? Okay. And if you feel that they don't, because body language is everything, then have them tell you what they understand. Well, can you explain to me what we just talked about? And take it in segments. Don't just spill it out and then all of a sudden after 30 minutes be like, can you understand? Let me know what you think. Okay. Do it in sections.
Yes. And so what I wanna add to that, the understanding that, okay, this is the human brain. This is the prefrontal cortex, okay? And this prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that helps make our best decisions. It's our CEO. It takes the short term into account and the long term. It's the most evolved part of our brain. It has our best stuff. It's our executor. And that particular part of your brain does not fully mature until we're about 25 years old. Okay. So qualify this with that most humans are using only 10 to 15% of the capacity of their prefrontal cortex. But even besides that, your child has a developmental level and a developmental age that you have to understand. You have to kind of have an awareness of what is normal for your child and how a child who's age 2 would process something versus a child who's age 6. So, I think we have to really start thinking about and having more understanding about developmental age. Can you say a little bit about how you might talk to different kids across the developmental ages?
Well, as a psychiatrist, I actually just have normal conversation. I don't like to use the word normal because everyone has their idea what normal is, but you want to get away from trying to understand what words they use by talking about something that's fun to them. And when you talk about something that's fun to them, you can get an understanding of what words, what level they understand certain topics, those type of things, and use those words. Use the words that they're using into your explanation of trying to, and this goes with anything, and trying to and trying to explain or educate to them something complex or complicated.
Yes. So for the person that said their child is 2 and 4, this is what she's doing is helping you to think about what words is your child using, and then taking those words and helping them understand what's happening in the if they've seen footage, or I'll give you an example and maybe you can speak to this. Someone in her pain showed her 7-year-old the video of George Floyd, and then brought it up to the group, and of course was concerned about PTSD in her child and how to manage that. So can you speak at all to that experience, or how you would respond to that?
Yeah. So my next answer to that is that we don't always have to use words. I'm so sorry. I want to add to this. We can use pictures. You can have your child draw pictures, visualizations. If you're showing them a visualization, you may want to get a visualization from them and how they understand. Because as we said, that sometimes the words go in and out, they may not understand. So visuals may help. They really may, and not visuals where you're triggering them, but visuals that they can draw to have understanding. I mean, don't we see as a child psychiatrist, I have a lot of drawings in my office.
Yes.
Mommy, daddy, dog, house, and this is, and then you try to interpret, right? I mean, kids will give you a lot of information just from their drawings. They'll give you a lot. The colors they use, who's in close proximity, if someone has a happy face or a sad face, if someone's lying down. I mean, they'll give you a lot of information. Now, I don't expect parents to fully understand that because clinically trained to understand that, as a therapist, right? So if you need our help, that's where we're there as well. You don't have to do this alone, y'all. We're not giving you a homework assignment to say, hey, let me try to understand what this means. We're here to help as well.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I recommend getting a professional involved. I do want to say, after brief responses, you definitely want to make sure that you basically you want to explore the differences of what they know. So there's a difference between protesters and rioters and looters. Not everyone out there, because we want to promote we should be talking about what protesting is.
Yes, that's 3 different and distinct things.
They are. And everyone out there, we want to make sure, because that's a visual that they see. So you got to break it down. What's what, who's what. Right. and understand what's the right way to demonstrate. So as a demonstrator, it's right to protest, but this is not right to do as a rioter or a looter.
So and explaining and defining words so that the kid has the vocabulary to understand these nuances.
Yes. And just understand that they may not understand what writer is, but they're going to listen. They're going to hear it. They're going to hear it in the media. They're going to hear it. So even if they don't understand it, you're explaining it to them in a way they can understand. So when the next time they hear it, they'll say, okay, writer's not good. Right. Okay, looter's not good. Protester, okay. You know what I'm saying?
That's good. You may have to protest sometimes when things are not not right, which we historically it's encouraged.
It's encouraged. All right. It's encouraged. And I especially have received a lot of questions about that over the last few days from white families because, you know, they want to raise anti-racist children. Sure. So they want to go through history as we have and try to help their children understand, well, these are the injustices. And so this is the response. And I think that's so important. And I was so happy to hear that. Because, you know, so they need to know that we don't want to avoid those things. Right.
Okay. What resources are you giving to people that, especially white folks? Come on, let's keep it real. What resources are you giving to people, or where are you directing them to do more self-education so that they don't rely on people who are tired of having to explain stuff? Where can they go to get those things?
They can actually go to my Dr. Dawn Psych MD. On Instagram, as well as my Facebook page, Dr. Dawn. So it's DRDAWN, P as in Paul, SYCHMD. I actually wrote a just a little something about
a detailed and specific guideline.
To white families. You know, I think I said this last time on our show, on your show, excuse me, Dr. Alauna, last time, is that, you know, my experience has been different. You know, I actually grew up around white people in a white neighborhood. When, you know, at the outskirts of Flint, when I moved from Flint to the suburbs for high school. And so many of my friends, I was the only Black in my class and things of that nature. So, you know, I feel like I have some experience in that area, but also in the patient population that I serve in my private practice predominantly are white, but the clinics that I serve are predominantly a different socioeconomical status. So ethically, I needed, you know, both to balance.
I see both sides. I see all sides of this equation. Yes.
All of us, right? And so many of my white patients have been wanting to have this conversation. Sure. And this is great because we've been needing to have these conversations.
Definitely need to have a conversation. Wonderful. I'm happy we're here.
Yes. So there is a list, a part of that post.
Okay, so what do you put in on this website that can be helpful to these folks? It's
an extended list. So there's videos on there, there's books, there's websites, and I didn't actually compile this list. There were 2 individuals that compiled the list. Sure. There are many things on the list that are age developmentally appropriate, so that the list is broken down. So I'm just going to refer people because I know we have a lot of questions to get to, but I definitely want you all to check that out on Dr. Dawn Psych MD. Yeah. And again, it's under the title, I think, Resources for White Families, to talk about racism. But one other thing I want to say when talking to your children, don't forget media. Because, let me just make it plain and clear. Our minds, our brains are so complex, so complicated that there is a chemical in our brain that's a part of our reward system called dopamine. Dopamine can go either way. So if, you know, dopamine rather have, you know, you can see this in your child when they play video games, especially the video games are violent. Dopamine is going to be released and it's going to want to, it's hard for those children to detach. We rather watch reality TV than PBS special for kids. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I don't, but you know what I mean.
It's a human trait.
I see development in my practice. I don't want any other exposures when I get home, but that's beyond the point. What I am saying, though, is that we have to be careful because that's when it's hard for children to detach. And especially when these games are violent, when they have controls that are vibrating, when the screen is vivid, full of color, looks real. right? The noise, the action, all of those things. So you want to be
It's designed to be addictive, by
It's
the way.
very
I
addictive.
mean, they
That
study the
dopamine.
human brain. They know dopamine and the brain reward system very well.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead, Dr. Dawn.
Yes. So we have to be careful. So the media also may project more they may focus more on the negative parts of what's going on than the positive, because they want the ratings. They want people to attract to them. The news station. Oh, come on, y'all. Oh, listen, psychology is involved in marketing, is involved in media, is involved in everything. We know it, y'all. We break it down for you all. They study you. They study your
Everything.
brain. And it's about psychology. So what they're going to do is they're going to use what they know to attract you, even though it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm. So being aware of what we are allowing to program our children's mirror neurons and program our own mirror neurons and affect our dopamine, right? Because we all have it. We all have these addictions. And so you're saying we have to actually wrestle and be very mindful of the amount of time that we allow our children to engage in devices and non-human interactions that are designed to give them highs and lows and emotions that you can hear come out when you're listening to them play these games and listen to these shows. You can listen to the vibe, the emotions of a show, and probably know whether or not it's a healthy thing to be putting into your kids' ears.
Exactly, because these games look so real, and so sometimes these games become their reality. And then when they see images of what's going on in the real world, it's hard to distinguish what's real and what's not. I'm serious. Like for kids, it may be difficult to distinguish what's real, what's not. Oh, is that how it's supposed to go? Yeah, because that's what I'm doing in the video game. I'm supposed to stomp on people. I'm supposed to beat them up, and that's what I see on TV. That's the reality.
Right.
So where is that person, that parent, that caregiver there to express and explain, no, that's not the reality. That's not what we do. This is a game versus this is reality. So you need to make sure you make that distinction if you allow your child to do that. But if you don't, hey, good too. But you don't want to avoid it either. You don't want to keep it away from them, because this is the reality. You see what I'm saying? You have to approach it very cautiously. And every child, every parent is different.
So we had another question that came in from the previous show, and it sort of leads to this. How does this trauma of racism and the things that are going on these days, how does it impact a student's learning in the classroom? How does going through trauma affect their learning?
Yeah, so this is interesting, because oftentimes we think that if we're in a certain environment, we're triggered by it. That's not always the case. What I mean by that is that sometimes when things are not going well at home, it comes out in the classroom.
So kids could be getting traumatized by seeing someone environment and then see them out in school.
I'm sorry, Dr. Long, you went out for a minute. Can you repeat your question?
Okay. So kids could be being exposed to something traumatic, like seeing their parents seeing domestic violence at home, or hearing their parents arguing, or hearing their parents yelling or mad about something, or see something violent, like see the George Floyd video, or see any of these videos being passed around. And that could come out in their even in school. Can you tell us more about how we might see that?
Grades decline. They may start fighting. They may shut all the way down. They're not talking. They're not, they're isolating at school. They're not eating. It depends on how it impacts that kid. And also, if, like, let's say something is going on at home and it's not being discussed, then they feel that they shouldn't discuss it anywhere else. Or if they're told, like, not related to what's going on, but like, you better not say nothing, or keep quiet and all that, don't whine and don't do this, they're not going to do it.
So,
and if they see something like something traumatic of someone being physically violent or emotionally violent, you may see it mirrored in your child at home or at school. You know what I'm saying? So don't just assume that if there's a behavior that shows up in your children's school environment, that the environment is triggered by the school, or excuse me, that is triggered by the school. You want to ask questions of all the environments of where they live to get an understanding of how they're doing in all those environments. Now, there are also occasions where kids may just act out or let out in places where they're most comfortable, with people who they're most comfortable with. So that's another thing that you can look for as well. So if it's a teacher, for example, or a counselor or principal, they may actually, you know, and principal's more intuitive to what that child is, and they notice a change, because change, I always say change is keyword. Right. You notice a change.
They were doing like this, and now we're doing this.
Exactly.
When we see a major change, we know that.
Ask questions.
Yes. And then it's tough to measure this stuff up, because we all had such a quick change in March with with quarantine, and now our children are home, so their behaviors already changed because we had that big shift. And now
after spring break,
right after spring break, right, and now we have protests and on top of coronavirus, and just thing after thing, insanity coming out of leadership, and so for those people who are feeling really emotionally, those kids who are emotionally shook up, what do you do with that when you're sort of stuck in the house with them, and you don't know, some of these kids are big enough to beat up the parent that's in the house, or to really make it hard to live with them. Like, what do we do?
You have to keep the environment structured. That is so key. That is so key. And structure doesn't equal control, in a sense where it's regimented every single day, that if someone gets off, then everything is gonna, you know, all hell's gonna break loose. No, you just want to make sure it's as structured as possible. So if that means putting up a schedule on your kitchen, or, you know, on your refrigerator, everyone's schedule, task list, all of those things, do that. If it's a time of the year where you don't want your child to think it's summertime, I know they're out of school, most kids are out of school, but it doesn't help that they're waking up at noon. It just doesn't help.
Right.
It doesn't, because again, naturally our bodies want to be up during the day. So I would recommend, you don't have to get up at 6 like they do for school, but you want to keep a steady schedule to where they are up, they are active, they're eating, they're learning something. You want to keep them motivated, because we don't know how these summer school sessions are going to go either. If they have to go to summer school, they're going to go to day camp, are they available? Public YMCA's open. You want to try to prepare a structured time for them, and that's going to involve some creativity.
Now that brings me to us, like, because a lot of people, the adults, I think, are having a hard time holding structure for the kids, because the adults are struggling, because we're experiencing so many traumatic things. Like, I know I find myself having difficulty sometimes with just keep horrific, horrible things are happening, where every time I turn on social media, I'm seeing fires burning, I'm seeing death reports, I'm seeing other violent behaviors, white America on Black America. And this is really about, like, how do we dig into this racism conversation so that we can root out, where do we go from here with it for adults? How do we do better in our conversations about racism?
Got to talk about it.
Okay.
You got to talk about it. I would limit the exposure. You don't have to look at every news broadcast when it comes out. All right. Yeah. I check the TV twice a day, and I check for information and advisement, guidance. I don't check for anything else but that. So I need to know what's going on. And then I also need to advise myself what I got to do, or thinking about what my patients, where they are, so I can advise them.
Right.
Because a lot of people are coming to me with PTSD and all this kind of stuff. So, and I got to know what's going on for them, but I limit that. I check it twice a day. Absolutely. And some days I don't check it at all.
Absolutely. So, and what I tell people when we're talking about having this conversation is that we have to understand that we have to really start getting in touch with our psychology, right? Like our psyche, your inner man, your spiritual self, your emotions, your whatever you want to call it, right? Like the invisible stuff, the invisible part of you that we can't see, but we know that it's real. We know that it exists. Everyone has parts of their biology that are turning switches here, right? We are animal, human, and spirit. And we have biology that is doing stuff in terms of how this body, I mean, we talked about dopamine, right? So one of the things that I learned as I really started to listen to and look at the world after Michael Brown Jr. and Ferguson happened was that my standard for trauma I've been trained into it being way up here. But as I started to accept that there were things that weren't on that list of trauma, it made me start to go, okay, well, what if what I learned was not correct? What if I just kind of step back and let the person tell me that trauma's there and just listen for what's painful and how are they processing that? I started to see not only trauma in my patients, and my colleagues, and my family, and my friends, and I'm sitting here diagnosing everybody, right? But then wait a minute, hold on,
it's real, honey. It's real, honey. It's real.
It's real. Then I said, okay, if I have traumas, and I'm a trauma psychiatrist and a damn good one at that.
You damn real right, you are.
Come on, all right. But if I'm having trauma and I'm a trauma psychiatrist and I didn't even know that I was having trauma based on what had been taught to me, then now I have to really start watching myself and watching my mind and watching this biology that I know that I'm trying to teach to them. What is it doing to how I see things? What is it doing to how I'm interpreting things? So then it becomes, what is my bubble of perception telling me, and how am I responding to that? What were you going to say?
I was going to say that's why I have my own therapist.
Come on. Get some professional help, y'all. There is absolutely zero it is the best investment that you can make right now. There is money, it has to be spent. You cut down on your gas. If you don't have insurance, put that towards seeing somebody, teletherapy. You can, right where you're sitting right now, you can be seeing a therapist. Go on psychology.
I mean, okay, what other profession is able to do telemedicine at its best now? What other profession?
No, nobody but us is. I'm like, I don't have to touch you. I don't have to. As a matter of fact, at this point, I'm like, I don't actually need to hear what is going on in your life because I already know it's traumatic.
Exactly.
It's full of pain. It's full of racism. It's full of isms. Somebody is telling you too light, you too dark, you too short, you too tall, you too loud, you too quiet, you're not good enough on this, you're not good enough on that. You have all kinds of BS programmed in your mind and your belief systems about who and what you are, simply because you are existing in a design that has come out of primitive people. We sorry.
I mean, that's real though. That's real. You keep it real. And that's why Black folk, let me tell y'all, y'all. I held on to my mom's death for 4 years. 4 years. I actually went into residency 2 weeks after she died. Okay. Like, who does that?
Just keep going. Just tunnel through. Just tunnel through. Yeah.
Just tunnel through. But that's what we do. Right. We gotta keep ourselves busy. We gotta deflect. We gotta avoid because we can't feel. We don't want to feel.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. You must make yourself. You're gonna feel. You have to feel because you're human.
And it's in there.
Please, y'all, come on. It's a part of the process, but I promise you, if you work it, you'll get through it. I promise you. I promise you.
So that leads to another question that I have, like, because several people asked, how do we show empathy for people who have never shown empathy to you? Like, why be empathetic towards anyone? What's the importance of it? How can I, as a brown person, have empathy for somebody who I know is in a demographic, a shade of human that that we would call white America? How do Black folk process still using empathy?
First of all, let's understand what empathy is. It's putting it's allowing yourself to be in someone else's shoes is the most simplest way, but it's an emotion attached to that. So someone lost a loved one, sympathy is I feel sorry for you, but empathy is like, I know how you feel.
I'm in there with you, right?
I'm in there with you.
I'm in there with you.
And a lot of times, because you experience some degree of grief yourself. So that's the genuinity of it, right?
Right.
That you can actually understand. So empathy is about understanding. See, the thing is, you have to be open in order to have empathy. If you're closed off on it, it's hard to teach, it's hard to understand, it's hard to even communicate empathy. If one of the people are closed off.
So you have to do it intentionally. You have to make a choice to try to understand someone, even if they are doing something that is relatively toxic or relatively damaging. It is just being willing to step outside of your version of reality and consider their version just for a second.
You have to, because there is something that's blocking their ability to understand you. So you need to understand them, especially if you're the one that has the empathy.
It makes you more powerful.
It does.
Because it in a way, it allows you to see more of the shared reality. And I'll give an example of a conversation that I had earlier. I did an Instagram live with JJ on the mic, so shout out to my people. And we were talking about how to talk to kids. And she mentioned having an experience in a park where she was running past the woman and she had on her headphones and she realized this woman was screaming at her. And she's like, all these people jogging in this park and this woman is screaming at me and being very disrespectful, a white woman. And she's a, brown chick like me and like you. So she takes off her headphones and she's about to go off and, they had an exchange, but she ultimately decided to walk away. And when we talked using the skill Dear Man that I taught her on the show, she said, I never thought about that I might have stepped into this lady's space. I never considered, because in my Dear Man, I apologize just a little bit for maybe consider that I might have made you uncomfortable, but I still think this behavior is not appropriate and I'm still addressing it on the spot. So it's interesting how we have a difficult time slowing down enough to consider the other person's experience. What's up with that?
We gotta keep our impulses in check first. But this takes practice. That's why we have to practice this. This doesn't just come by you hearing us saying this, you all, and doing it. I mean, it does take practice. That's why I love therapy, because you can practice this in therapy. You can learn the tools necessary. Your therapist can meet you where you are and you are able to, practice this. But the other thing is we never know where people are. We never know what they're thinking. We never know when we cross their paths, what's going on in their minds, what's going there in their, in their space. So that might have been projecting onto her.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Absolutely. Who knows? And that is the construct of racism. And that's the reason why I say it's a mental illness. And that's the reason why I think we have to treat it as a mental illness, because it's a product of a primitive way of thinking. It's a product of a limited way of thinking where I look at another person, and because of the television shows that I've seen, I've watched Law and Order. I see what the criminal people look like, because of the conversations that I've overheard in my life and my background, of what Papa used to say about them Black folk, or because of the handful of interactions that I may have had with Black people in my life, or maybe I dated a few, you know, or what have you, that now I have my experiences are going to make me draw the conclusions. I'm going to apply that to this interaction, even though it may have absolutely nothing to do with what's happening in the moment. Can you speak on that, Dr. Dawn?
Yeah, because can I say when we go from here, add that to it? We got to get rid and lose our judgment. That's the key. That's the key.
But so many people think they're not judgmental.
Ooh, well, that's the whole constructive racism too.
That's true.
You're judging someone based on their color,
has given
how
us,
they look,
and
all of those things associated. Oh, that's a thug. What does a thug look like? What's a thug look like? Do they have tattoos? Do they have piercings? Are they Black? I mean, what does a thug look like?
Yes.
What are these constructs that you have developed in your mind that you've associated with this persona?
And draw a conclusion.
There you go. You see it again, and boom, you draw a conclusion. I mean, our president doesn't. I mean, I'm not saying anything wrong, because he does. He's used the words, right? So I'm concerned about that, because he's judging people, right? Yeah. He's exciting, and then he's exciting people because there are people that think that too.
Well, we're addicted. I want to be clear that we are addicted to this way of doing things. We're addicted. We have dopamine. Humans have dopamine systems. And we get addicted to trauma. We get addicted to the drama. We get addicted to, that's the reason why, like you said, the video games that take you on the roller coaster are more addicting than Pac-Man. Because, and we have a lot of times adults, first of all, human beings are belief-based creatures, meaning that what we believe becomes true for us. So we have, our strongest bias is confirmation bias. Right. Meaning that whatever I think is right, I'm going to accept information that fits my belief system. And then I'm going to reject information that does not fit my belief system, or that's coming from someone whose opinion I devalue, or I don't trust them as much, or they're in a package that doesn't make as much sense to me, or, you know, I can't hear something from that person. So it changes the way that a person even absorbs information or allows themselves to consider. So we have to actually start putting our own judgment to the side. So the way I teach empathy, because empathy is a teachable skill. And that's why I think it's so important that we have these conversations, because we lack empathy because we were founded in a profound and disgustingly damaging way of thinking. Traumatized people came over here and brought more trauma and have continued to create trauma. And the only way that you can stop the process and the cycle of trauma is to actually really root out the root cause of it. And that is these stupid ass classifications that we make on how we subjectively label each other. I call it shitty thinking. So the S is subjective. The H is harsh, the I is intense, the T is terrorizing to yourself. When you're being judgmental, you are damaged. You are not only damaging the other person, but you are damaging yourself. And you are creating some ugly shit up inside of you, because you are applying what you think the other person should be doing on everything that's happening. And that creates that negative experience up out of your amygdala and out of your body and brain. So it is not just it is not just understanding the emotions and why empathy is important. Empathy is important because it forces you to consider that your version of reality is not the only version of reality that's important here. It is also important that that other animal, human, spirit creator that's standing across from you, whether it's a child or whether it's a white, Black, Asian, all that stuff, still, if your mind is labeling things subjectively based on your opinion or your version, and where they don't add up to that, you are judging them, you are going to experience negative stuff stuff, period.
Exactly. So that means that you have to become introspective of what your beliefs are and have a conversation with yourself. Well, what do I believe about this? What do I believe about this person, this race? What was I taught? How do I feel?
Somebody today said that he does not believe that racism exists. This is a white man. He's a very successful white man and a person that I would otherwise consider to be wise when it comes to business. But what would you say to someone that says they're racist?
I had a conversation with a fellow resident of mine when I was in residency in St. Louis, in Missouri.
Okay. So what did we say to racism doesn't exist?
I said, well, you haven't experienced it, obviously, because it does. I mean, I'm not there to convince you.
Right.
But I'm here to tell you the stories where it does exist. And this is how it exists for me.
Right.
This is how it exists in my community. This is how it exists in people that look like me. This is how I've observed it. And there's implicit bias. There's microaggressions. Like, there's some conversations we have. I'm like, but wait, that could be considered racist.
Right. So how is it? So what, one of the things that I tell people is that the fact that someone can tell you something is painful or something is damaging me, and another person have the mental space to say that doesn't exist. That is a perfect example to me of lack of empathy and lack of trust, lack of belief that has just been building, spiraling. And we have a society, to me, that is producing so much trauma of just invalidation, trauma of just trying to exist, that it's almost like it's like creating hell on earth, a bunch of primitive painful experiences that people are, slapping each other up with and wondering.
Girl, I call it delusional.
Yeah, it is delusional.
It's delusion. Racism is taught. You're not born racist.
Yeah. Well, just like 1,000, I can't even remember exactly, but 1,000 years ago, they were still arguing, getting mad, and killing people when they said that the sun that the earth revolved around the sun. It takes humans a while to accept difficult things. And so, what does it mean if we accept that racism really exists and that something has been propping up the experience of whiteness invisibly, but they're having problems, they're having pain, they are having difficulty.
Lana, what if you're a part of that community? What if you're a part of the culture that has been racist to another culture? How does that make you feel? Even though you might not have done something.
Right.
It's you're a representation of it. Right. You're a trigger of it. You're a reminder of it. So sometimes people internalize that. And then they go into a state of denial.
Okay. So what can we do instead of that? What's the alternative?
Have conversations about that.
Listen, right. Oh, let's sit on that for just a minute right there. Active listening.
You have to.
And conversation means that you take in more through your 2 ears than you allow to come out of your 1 mouth.
Yep.
We're at a time to stop. Oh. Are you back? Is it there? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it clipped off for a minute, but let me just stop us here and say that active listening is a choice, and that at this point, the best advice that I can give people who identify as white is to learn how to be silent and listen, and just sit with the emotions, and sit with the discomfort, and sit with the guilt, and sit with the pain. You haven't had to experience it. Good for you. Let us tell you how it feels. And if it makes you uncomfortable, well, guess what?
A good thing.
It's a good thing. Welcome to your amygdala. Welcome to your empathy. Welcome to your healing. Welcome to your evolution.
Yes.
Welcome to a different world where we can actually fix racism like you say you want it to be.
Exactly.
You have to be willing to acknowledge other people's pain and learn how to actually write. You might have existed in a world that programmed you, and people could not be honest because it was too risky to even be yourself in that space where a white person could misjudge your intention or could become fearful of you, cause you to lose your job or lose your life, and any number of things in between. So you have not experienced the full reality of the world. And that may mean you have to stop and listen. I have a tool called Dear Man. You can send a text message to 832-772-2129 that says Dear Man, DEARMA space MAN, and get a Dear Man worksheet and learn how to process information and respond effectively, even when your emotions are triggered, even when you want to go into an explanation of why you're not racist and blah, 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 blah. That response is played out, it's old, it has to stop.
It is.
And we have to have some honest conversations where you can feel a little triggered and learn to ride that roller coaster, and you will survive it, just like we've had to survive the foolishness for so long. So join us in that emotional and mental strength that it takes to have real conversations about racism. Dr. Dawn, where can they find you?
Dr. Dawn Psych MD on all social media platforms, as well as drdawnpsychmd.com. So you can find me, and that's DR. Yep, that's it, right there.
And you have been dropping all types of wonderful episodes of. Is there your show or what is the schedule
Live
for
with
that?
Dr. Dawn. Live with Dr. Dawn. Yeah, so we've been doing about 3 shows a week. I'm probably going to go to 2 shows a week. So usually Sundays and Mondays. So our next show is on Sunday. Where I'll have a round table of Black men who are fathers and how to talk to their daughters and sons about what's going on.
Awesome. Yeah. And you can find more information about me at dralauna.com. You can access my audiobook, Wake Up to Your Brain, Biology, and Behavior, where I break down what's going on for you. And you can find the Trauma Recovery Academy, where the empathy skills practice course for traumatized humans is $1 a month.
Yes.
It's $1. Go on there, learn about your brain, your body, and your behavior. And this is Dr. Alauna and Dr. Dawn signing off. Thank you for joining us. And we appreciate you being here for Trauma Thursday.
Bye, y'all. Thanks, Dr. Alauna.